Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Against All Logic, 2017 to 2019. Alright, this guy's back, huh? Nicolas Jaar. I talked about this guy's last project, which was a compilation of house tracks created between 2012 and 2017. You can check out that video if you want more detailed thoughts on his previous work, I'll link it in the description. But long story short, while I don't dislike anything I've heard from this guy, either under Against All Logic or under his own name, I haven't loved anything he's made either. He's always felt kind of derivative, always like combining styles of other artists. He can present them in an interesting way, also never making the same album twice. He does have good instincts like that, but he really doesn't have much of an identity of his own as a producer. The Against All Logic compilation itself was a sample-heavy house record that really resonated with most other people as something special, but not really me as much. I mean, I'll freely admit certain tracks on the project got way more replay value than I ever would have expected. Some Kind of Game, for instance, by miles the best track on the album, and one that I've regularly returned to a lot over the past few years. And I kept around a few other tracks from there, like This Old House Is All I Have, City Fade, and Now You Got Me Hooked, that I do still enjoy. But I haven't put this project on in its entirety, basically since around the time I first uploaded my video on it. I remember finding it really bloated and having a fair few stretches that just ended up kind of boring to me. And even when I cut it down to the good tracks, some of those tracks ended up shrinking a little on me too. I suppose that still puts it above other projects of his, which I haven't listened to at all since making my video on him. And his message on the back of the vinyl release that says, "If you don't know jack about house, you'll love this," is a nice, funny bit of self-awareness. But you know, I'm not gonna act like I was going out of my mind with excitement for a follow-up to Against All Logic, but I did hear it was gonna be another left turn for Jaar, perhaps into some noisier and more experimental territory. So it did pique my curiosity. So what did we get with 2017 to 2019? Well, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is that I think this is the first project where it felt like Jaar definitively felt like he had an identity of his own. I mean, it's really not that hard, a left turn from the material on the compilation. It is marginally noisier and more experimental, but it's still very much recognizable as the same artist who made that comp. And it didn't directly call to mind someone else's style in the same way either, which was a pleasant surprise for sure. Additionally, this album is a lot more cohesive than the comp and flows way better. It's assembled with more purpose and more of a vision. It doesn't feel like it ran on too long like the comp did either. These are undeniable improvements. I will have to give him that. The bad news is that it's still not a great project for me. I do think it's far better than the comp from a pacing standpoint, but there's also no big standout tracks on here like Some Kind of Game. There's nothing here that really floored me or I felt like I was going to be compelled to revisit a lot in the future. All of it was good, but none of it was amazing. So, okay, individual tracks. I got some stuff to say about all of them. I will admit I was a little worried by the first 30 seconds of this album. The intro of the track Fantasy sounds directly lifted out of Amon Tobin's Fear and a Handful of Dust, with all its little plucking guitar-ish sounds. Though thankfully that was only the intro, and the track itself developed into something more compelling afterwards, chopping up a vocal sample and creating a solid crunching groove that wouldn't have been out of place on the comp. It's pretty fun, it's a nice build-up there. Bangs pretty hard too. The next track though, If Loving You Is Wrong, would have been most at home on the comp out of all the tracks here, with its prominent soul sample driving the hook and the more subtle minimal house beats buzzing away underneath it, though still being pretty fuzzed out with a couple of blown out noise bursts and evocative synth washes every now and then. That one's fun. Although, after this, the project kinda trails off for a bit. I was not a huge fan of With an Addict. I do like its more subtle synth textures in the background create a nice calming atmosphere, though its use of the break beats to create some more fast-paced groove came off kinda cliched to me, and the bored-sounding vocal snippets that play throughout kinda took me out of it too. It's not awful, but it's probably the lowest point on the project for me. If you can't do it good, do it hard is probably the catchiest track in the bunch. If there's any track here that I'm going to remember the sound of in the long term, it's this one. Lydia Lunch's rapped vocal hook is fun and adds some real personality and flavor to the track. But I can't say the track as a whole is one of my big favorites, since her voice doesn't show up until halfway into the track, and the first half before that is pretty dull and repetitive. Alarm is a track that really bangs, with its 808 beats and distorted kick drum hitting really hard. Although this track is also over way too quickly to be marked as a big favorite. It's not even 2 minutes long. It does thankfully transition cleanly into the much stronger D-fers, which hits with the same intensity and involves lots of buzzing and plunking trance leads. It's also totally blown out and clipping everywhere, like you just slammed a limiter on this one and squashed every sound into oblivion. Which ordinarily I would really not like at all, but I do think it kind of ended up adding to the character of the track. It's overbearing, absolutely, but it still manages to be pretty fun, all things considered. I like it. After this, though, we do hit a stretch of more techno-centric tracks that is probably the strongest part of the album for me. Faith strides forward at a steady pace and juxtaposes its foot-tapping techno beats alongside some really nice, smooth choir snippets and some plunky bass lines that vaguely remind me of those on C418's Excursions. I feel like there's some other project I'm forgetting about that this track pretty closely resembles, but never mind. Despite this track being 7 minutes long, it zips by really quickly and has plenty of progression to justify that length. And Penny is another really strong atmospheric techno cut, a bit more fast-paced, a bit Fortet-ish, albeit more hard-hitting than most of his stuff, and still lots of clipping noises filling out the mix next to the smoother melodic textures. I think this is probably my favorite track in the bunch, probably the one that has the most emotional resonance for me. I also think the project ends pretty nicely too, with You Forever, like a weird experimental ambient piece with reverb-covered chopped up samples and percussion that just flies all over the place without adhering to any coherent beat or rhythm. Kind of Flume-esque, I suppose, but with actual subtlety and some surprisingly nice soothing atmosphere. I have admittedly peeked at a few reviews of this project, and all of them had this picked as the least favorite. I'm not really sure why, to be honest. That track's pretty good. I like it. So yeah, that's 2017 to 2019. It's a pretty solid album. I enjoyed it. Is this going to be a project that really sticks with me in the long term and I'm going to be listening to a lot over the course of the next few months? Yeah, I seriously doubt it. I have a feeling I'm just going to stuff it on my hard drive and forget about it. But I will say I do like it more than the 2012-2017 comp. The comp had much better standouts, but I think this project came together way better as a complete whole and felt like it was assembled with more care. I think the sounds explored here are a little more unique. I think they make Against All Logic feel more like an artist with a proper identity rather than a dumping ground for random house tracks that Nicolas Jaar felt like throwing together. It honestly resolves quite a few of my issues with his music in general, so yeah. I mean, this may not stick with me in the long term, but I thought it was pretty cool, all things considered. Maybe he'll end up coming out with a project under this name that I think is properly great someday. He's at least pointed in the right direction now. Yeah, I'm overall feeling a 7.5 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters, they're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.